Why are people who often see the future ignored? Hi, and you're watching Making Sense with Robbie. Today I want to talk a little bit about the Casandra complex. And the Casandra complex is a metaphor or like an idea or a story, and it's from ancient Greek mythology, and it was about this woman named Casandra, and she was the daughter of a king. And Apollo, one of the gods, he wanted to marry her. He was in love with her, and so he was trying to woo her. He gave her the gift of prophecy, but she still rejected him. She didn't want him, and so he cursed her so that no matter what she saw, she couldn't change the future, and people wouldn't believe her when she told them what was going to happen. You know, it exists as a story, as a myth, but it's still a thing that happens today. And there's a lot of reasons why that happens, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. The main reason why this happens is because the world is really complex. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that people don't understand. Most people, for the most part, have this sort of surface understanding of reality. They have the surface understanding of what's going on. And like I've said before, this is mostly fueled by the mainstream media, social media, the internet. What happens is that because of the narrative that exists, they often have like a sort of shallow understanding of things. They don't necessarily understand the causes and effects or the relationships of events to other events or why those relationships exist even at all. You know, it makes sense for the most part to have like a shallow understanding of things because like, why would you understand something in depth? Why would you kind of dig in to try and understand it? For the most part, people don't have time. They don't really have the resources and time to try and make sense of things. And so they kind of offload thinking and understanding to sort of another source. And that's why they go to the news. That's why they go to social media to get these explanations for them. At the same time, the people who like deeply understand things, they're going to have like an audience, right? They're going to have a group of people who follow them. But outsiders to that group are going to think that those ideas are too extreme. They're going to think that they're fringe. They're going to think that they're conspiracy theories. They're kind of get disregarded. And this is kind of the problem, is that like when you understand something really in depth, when you have a very good understanding of what's going on, if you really understand a situation, then you're going to have access to a lot of like facts and information about it that most people don't realize or don't understand. And a lot of times, like I kind of talked about this in the narrative and in previous videos about like how the sort of common sort of normal understanding of things is like simplicity at the expense of nuance, at the expense of detail, at the expense of depth. And so because most people understand things in like simplistic, sort of holistic ways, they kind of miss the forest for the trees. They don't really understand the fact that there's connections there. And so when they hear opinions from people who do know about those connections, who do have that information, a lot of times those ideas are going to be rejected right off the bat because they don't fit into the narrative that person usually accepts. And so like ideas that are outside are often rejected. They're labeled as fringe. Now sometimes people, when they have these opinions, they're kind of and they have credentials to back them up, then sometimes people will take those opinions a little bit more seriously. But at the same time, there's always that possibility, you know, that those ideas are too fringe and they're too outside of the norm. And like part of the problem with credentials is that like a lot of people with credentials fall for the same misunderstandings as other people do. You know, they watch the same news, they watch the same information, and they have their like ideas clouded by like the same kinds of things that everyone else does. And like obviously when they're an expert in something, then obviously they know about that thing. But like there's always the possibility that like narratives, like mainstream narratives take over. Most times people are used to life being sort of stable, normal, and consistent, and things don't usually change. And so a lot of times people are uncomfortable with change. They reject change. They don't want change, and they don't really think that change is possible because they're just so used to what they're used to having. Like they're so used to the world that they live in right now, and that they don't necessarily think about these sort of maybe say low risk or unlikely things that sort of fall outside of the normal understanding of things. To add to this is most people don't understand risk, and there's a thing called recency bias, which I think is a big problem here, or there's a reason why this happens. And so recency bias is where people see the things that have recently happened, or they have like sort of this recent worldview. They have this recent sort of understanding of things. And so, you know, if you look outside and you say, oh, the stock market only goes up, housing prices only go up. So you have in your perspective, like the things that have recently been the case. And like, when you look at housing prices, it's been a long time, right? Like, you know, maybe if you're in the States, it's been like 14 years or something. But in Canada, it's been like, I don't even know, like 20 years that prices have been going up. And so like when people see things happening for like a long time, then they just assume that things will always be the same. And they put lower risk, they put lower sort of expectation of things that fall outside of that norm. So like basically the point though of recency bias is that people are more likely to believe what's happening right now will continue to happen than to believe that something different would happen, something unexpected would happen. Then people don't really think outside of that. They're less likely to think about things that are less likely to happen. They don't even necessarily know about them. And it's kind of like risks. Like people don't think about low risk things because they don't think that they'll happen. Something that's low risk isn't no risk, right? Like maybe there's a 1% chance of something happening, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. It can't happen. It means that it could happen or it will happen. It's just a matter of time before it happens. And obviously I'm just playing around with like a 1% risk and that's just an arbitrary number. But like the point is that even if something seems like very low risk, that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's unlikely or less likely than other outcomes. And sort of like related to this is like people usually don't accept these things until they actually change. Like most people are less likely to believe that something, sort of out of the ordinary or strange is going to happen. But then when it happens, then they accept it. But the risk, of course, is that they don't prepare, that they haven't positioned themselves correctly for about what was going to happen. And so they kind of miss out on opportunities. But I guess that's an advantage for people who are sort of aware or willing to look for alternative perspectives, who are looking for alternative ideas and alternative ways of understanding what's going on. Whatever people tend to expect, whatever people think is the way that things are going to go, then that usually means that that risk for something different is always building up. It's growing. It's still there. It's not gone away. It's just not as obvious. Change is scary. Like unexpected things are scary. And so people are more likely to reject them and deny them because it sort of is outside of what they normally expect, what they're normally willing to sort of expect and sort of what they feel comfortable with. And anytime that people are challenged in what they believe, then this makes them uncomfortable. This makes them sort of put up their defenses, and then that makes them also, maybe it's also too, like if they don't want to be scared. Like people don't want to be scared about scary things happening, so they pretend that scary things can't happen. They like ignore the possibility of scary things because if they accept them, then that means they might have to prepare, that may have to do something. And so a lot of times people are more comfortable with just accepting things as they are and then like being surprised because that's easier. That's less trouble, at least in the beginning. But when it happens, it's not necessarily less trouble. Most of the time, it's easier to just pretend that there's nothing bad could happen, that there is no risk. And so people are okay to like go with that because for the most part, it works. But that's the whole point. You don't get insurance because every day, things are normal. You get insurance for that 1 out of 1,000 chance that something bad happens, and then you have to protect yourself. That's the thing, right? Like most people probably think, well, like insurance is a scam, and maybe it is, but like the whole idea is like you're not getting insurance for today or tomorrow or yesterday. You're getting insurance for something that hasn't happened yet, but might happen in the future that you don't know about. But the thing is that the world's always changing. Life is always changing. Things are always changing. And it's always the people who see things differently who realize this, who see it before it's happening. Most people won't accept something until they see it with their own eyes, until it's right there. And so like you can make predictions, you can see things, you can see patterns, and you can say what's happening, and you can tell other people what's happening, but they're probably not going to accept it until it actually happens, until it really becomes a thing in the world. In another way, though, like it's kind of natural, or it's kind of normal to reject these different ideas because we're trained throughout school, throughout life to kind of fit in, to be like everyone else, and so we tend to reject, or we tend to be uncomfortable with the idea of being different from everyone else. But the thing is that the people who are different from everyone else, like they're usually the ones who like make the discoveries. They're usually the ones who change the world. Like, Nobel Prizes go to people who think differently about problems. They think differently than the majority of the people in their field. And that's how they discover opportunities. That's how they discover things that can lead to big changes, that can lead to changing the way that people do a certain type of work. There's like that risk, right? Like there's the risk of being the outsider, and it's scary to be an outsider, and no one really wants to be an outsider. But like at the same time, sometimes outsiders, sometimes they're wrong. They don't come up with the solutions. But the thing is that usually, though, it's going to be the outsider who actually comes up with the solution that actually changes the whole industry, that actually changes the whole thing. Because they kind of spotted something that was off, that didn't make sense, that didn't fit into the model, and everyone else just kind of disregarded it, but they pursued it. They followed through with it. They realized that there was something going on there, that there was something wrong. Whereas like most people, they want to fit in, they don't want to rock the boat, they don't want to change things, they don't want to challenge the narrative, they just want to fit in, they just want to go along with things. And so right or wrong, true or false, novel, different ideas are usually rejected by most people. And that's just the way it is. It's because most people don't have the depth of knowledge, they don't have the ability to understand or make sense of complex things, and so they just kind of accept things as they are until they see with their own eyes that things have changed. Kind of tried to make the sense of why often the people who tell different stories are rejected. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you're curious about understanding or making sense or trying to sort of understand how to think about things, but you don't want someone to tell you what to think about them, then click that subscribe button, because that's what I'm here to do. And you've been watching Making Sense with Robbie. Thanks for watching. We'll talk next time. Goodbye.